Those vehicles that none of us really want to see, but sometimes are very glad to see. Ambulance, fire and rescue vehicles are very important in the present world to the complex traffic systems and other situations that we get ourselves involved in. Now, these aren't present day serving vehicles in the main. These are vehicles that have done their bit and been demobbed from the various services and are now privately owned by enthusiasts. Many of these enthusiasts having once served probably in the ambulance or fire, etc. We're at a special show now for such emergency vehicles, and we'll be able to have a wander around and see what some of these people have seen fit to buy and collect. Now there's a lovely old vehicle there. That's an early ambulance. I would say early post-war. It's built on the chassis of the wonderful big Hillman Pullman, or the Humber Pullman. Hillman and Humber both put badges on that particular car, being members of Roots Group, and the engine in there, being Roots Group of course, is the same engine that you would normally get in a Commer lorry. Wonderful chassis. Our casualty in the back, I'm sure she'll be quite comfortable for the rest of the day, being only a dummy. But there you have a typical inside of a early post-war ambulance. Not purpose-built like some of the vehicles today, but built by a firm on a big, large car chassis. Some of these chassis were Daimler, I remember. Cars with good solid chassis. The modern unit construction vehicle doesn't lend itself to this conversion like the old time chassis did. Just a couple of comfortable bunks to put stretchers on or people on, with a small box full of equipment. And of course on the front you didn't have those twin-tone horns and blue flashing lights. You had usually a big silver bell. What a lot of chance you'd get nowadays to hear that bell in the day's traffic. Beautiful vehicle that. Next we have a big Daimler. Just look at the size of that. Not a very practical vehicle for tight corners and narrow roads, is it? But then they had to find a chassis that would take it, and this is the big Daimler chassis that was used in limousines and, dare I say, hearses. But we don't include those in emergency vehicles because in those cases people weren't in such a hurry, were they? Now, another popular chassis for use by the emergency services was the Bedford chassis. This is the lightweight Bedford. A beautiful little lorry these Bedfords were in the lightweight class, but not only were they very good and reliable, they had the same engine as the bigger Bedford. There we have three vehicles there of the early post-war era. Once again, fully equipped. Nothing like the modern day equipment that you get with your paramedics on ambulances now. I remember only too well in my early days in the police force and back in the early 50s when you phoned for an ambulance for an accident somewhere out in the sticks, to put it bluntly, you sometimes had to wait 20 minutes to half hour for it to attend. You get a much better service than that now. Daimler's big 6-cylinder overhead valve engine in there. These class cars were very reliable and something you needed, of course, for an ambulance service. You can see the classic bell on the front. Very collectible now, the old bells that were used in police, fire and ambulance. I remember the name Winkworth. It was the firm who made those bells. This one has been fitted with the blue lamp. The blue lamp came in, I think, in the 60s. I see this one belongs to a conservation group. Some of these lads hold their vehicles in a group, others have them individually. Now another emergency service, of course, is the old breakdown. Here we've got something built by AEC, but it's a customised AEC job. It's built on the Matador chassis, which was that famous AEC built for artillery work during World War II, but it's got the modern tin cab front on it and a good crane on the back. That's capable of moving a broken down bus or whatever. Now this is another vehicle here, you see, but it's got the name Carmichael. It's a modern style vehicle, but the Carmichael is the firm who convert them. We got this quite a lot with some of the timber vehicles converted by firms like Douglas, etc. Austin, this was a very similar face here that we had on the Austin vans of the 50s and 60s. But of course, anything capable of being used as a van was also capable of being used as an ambulance. So here we have one, the Austin ambulance. Austin later to amalgamate with Morris to become the British Motor Corporation. Nothing tuned up or tarted up on the suspension of these vehicles. They were just plain vans with sometimes a coachwork ambulance body on, but to drive them fast to an emergency was not easy. Another fine example of our small Bedford here with the bell on the front. Very good vehicles to drive to emergency Ds. You had a top speed in that Bedford round about the 60 miles an hour, perhaps more, and good brakes. That's one thing you could always rely on with the Bedford, was a good set of brakes. Bit more up to date here now with the German registration on the front. This is a Volkswagen. Come all the way over from Deutschland to show off its equipment and state of preservation. A more recent vehicle this, and of course in conjunction with that you see the more recent equipment. Many of the voluntary crews in the older days were just trained first aiders, just competent in the St. John's first aid system. Here we've got a Mark II Cortina. The Cortina estate fitted out for emergency services. Purely standard vehicle, just converted. Now privately owned. Why do they do it? Well, later on we hear all about that. Shows like this are very interesting, of course. So at these shows we depend on enthusiasts or fanatics about collecting things. Here we've got one of the Bristol Ambulance Preservation Group's BMCs. Did a lot of service in and around Bristol in its time. There you are, the complete history of it on the front. You only got to stop and look at these and have a chat to the owners and the drivers of them, and you might get some very interesting stories. Quite roomy, this one, and by this time beginning to look a little bit more like a proper ambulance that we look at today. A nice range of Fords and Bedfords, and here we've got more of a control point vehicle here based on the old Ford Thames chassis. Whenever you get a major disaster, of course you want a control point, and here we have the control point, which is the room where the radio control, where they keep in touch with other services such as fire, police, etc. You only want a big disaster, or really a rail crash or plane crash, and a vehicle like this is very valuable to get to the scene to perform all your operations from. There she is, the good old Thames. I note that they've routed the exhaust pipe round at the front rather than let the fumes get up in the back and asphyxiate the poor operator up there. Very thoughtful. Based on the later Bedfords, very popular these were in van form, dormobile forms, but on a nice body on here. It's another, I don't know if that's an ambulance or control point, but it looks quite a well-equipped job. And these enthusiasts, they just don't only buy a vehicle and leave it at that. They collect from time to time every bit of equipment they can, and they are equally as well equipped, these vehicles, as they were in their times. And when you bring along a few of these to a show, there's quite a lot of help available from them if you do get an emergency, be it someone faint or fall down, and they want some looking after until the proper medical attention can be there. A number of these enthusiasts are very, very capable of performing those first aid duties. That's certainly a well-equipped little room there, isn't it? Out of our estates, this time with the roof hired for the purpose. Very interesting subject, these emergency vehicles, because there's so many different adaptations from just a standard van, a standard car, or the various alterations that other manufacturers have put into them. Now that really is interesting, that one though. As I say, they always look for a good solid chassis vehicle, and here they've chosen one of the best, the big Mercedes. Ambulance written the proper way round. There was a time in the 60s when it came to fashion then to write it the opposite way around, so that if you're in your car and you looked up in the mirror, you could read it readily and get out of the way. Well, you can't have an emergency section or any section of vehicles without including Land Rovers. Land Rovers certainly contributed a lot towards police, fire and ambulance vehicles. Any form of emergency, you've got to find the Land Rover there. Going back a bit too, right to the era of the Bell. This one fitted with a useful awning on the side. Another one of the early transits. It's another firm was Ford Transit. Just about made use of its capabilities in every walk of life, certainly including the ambulance service. Proud owner here, only pleased to tell us what he's collected and where he's been. Another entirely different styled Land Rover there. The specialist body. And once again, loads of equipment. One stretcher and the seat nearby for whoever's doing the attending. I reckon if you went to a show like this and said, is there a doctor available, you'd have a queue form in no time at all. See someone comfortably sitting down in the back there now, but the useful thing about these when you take them to the show, here's the old Morris, very similar to the Austin we saw earlier, but I did say that they'd amalgamated and were building similar vehicles. Useful thing I was saying about these vehicles is you take them to a show. If it's a 2-day show, you've got somewhere comfortable to sleep at night, haven't you? Liverpool's old ambulances, they've come from far and wide. Other smart Bedford. He hasn't got a problem. The bonnet's up there because he's polished his engine, I dare say, and he wants to show off how well he's preserved this vehicle. Here we got the situation here with the ambulance spelt backwards on the front there, just in case we didn't know what was closing on us rather rapidly. I don't know what the body is. It's a specialist body on a Bedford chassis, though. We took a similar Bedford to that to Romania on one trip that I was going out there on, and they wouldn't use it for 12 months because they couldn't get permission to drive a right-hand drive vehicle out there. This is a lovely vehicle here. Look, this is the Austin Shearline chassis. They were big classic cars used for hearses or whatever, but then again, very adaptable for ambulance use. In a very unusual colour scheme too, but very smart. Of course, ambulances were not only owned by the ambulance service, they were used by large companies. Here we have one, of course, used to belong to the National Coal Board, the mine rescue. Now, as we said earlier, it's most important to have a vehicle to act as a control point, and this was a vehicle used to go to any mine rescue to act as a communications vehicle. Now, I won't go deeply into this. I know it's based on that wonderful chassis of the Leyland Comet. We're going to go over to an old friend of ours who's lucky enough to be at the show chatting up to people. That's Nigel James, and he's going to chat to those owners and tell us all about the various vehicles.
If you ever worked down the mines at all, you'd certainly be glad to see the vehicle behind me. It's a mines rescue vehicle, in fact. We're going to find out more now from Lynn Mayo, who's one of the present owners. Lynn, what's the make and model of this particular vehicle?
It's a 1956 Leyland Comet mine rescue vehicle. We've got the original colours. We've been finding out about it. The bodywork coach built by Wilson and Stockholm in Lancashire, and we like the vehicle. If we'd had accident or anything in the mines, I mean, we would have liked to use it as well. So
now it's in remarkable condition here today at Crystal Palace Park. How long did it actually take you to get it up to the standard that we see it at today?
We've spent the last year like 24 hours round the clock down the workshop, some nights not going to bed, just trying to get it back as best we can to this condition.
And whereabouts did you find it originally?
It was found in Greek, which is between Falmouth and Houston, in a field, and we transferred it back to our home in Gwyvion and restored it.
Now the name is quite interesting as well, isn't it? You've actually, I see that the name plate is on the front. There's some flowers, some pretty flowers painted on it. What's the background to that?
Well, we were told this is the original name. The coal board actually named the vehicles as they had them, so we thought, well, we'd like to keep it the same. It really is nice. So Big Bertha it is.
Now, we talked originally at the start of our little chat here today about mines rescue. What sorts of things would this vehicle have provided in the unfortunate event of a disaster in a mine?
Well, they would have changed into their gear in the front part of the vehicle. Then they had lockers on the side where they kept all their equipment, and they would make tea as the people were brought up. All the equipment was stored in lockers at the side of the vehicle, and inside was made, they make tea, and they had cupboards and first aid equipment and things like that in general. So it was pretty contained. We still have a couple of the original cupboards inside. We managed to sort of survive, and they're still there. So we're quite pleased about that. And they're numbered, so which is quite nice.
Now you've travelled quite a way here to get here, up the M5, up the M4 and the A23 presumably to get here today. You've also got some other plans as well, haven't you, for this particular vehicle?
That's right. We are going to Czechoslovakia tomorrow for a rally over there, and then from there we're going on to Holland. So we're hopefully doing quite a lot of travelling with her, because we don't want to just sort of see her stuck there now. We want to use her and enjoy her.
I was going to ask you actually, what were your future plans? So hopefully you hope to be travelling to more rallies and that sort of thing.
We certainly do, and let her be seen, because she is very rare. There were 7 made, and to our knowledge there was only 2 surviving. So it's a pretty rare beast.
Well, Lynn, thanks very much indeed for your time. It's been very interesting finding out about this particular mines rescue vehicle, and we wish you well for the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. Well, we're surrounded by so many stars here today, it's quite remarkable. Eagle-eyed viewers of this model behind me might recognise it from a very well-known television series. John, what series are we talking about?
It was in Heartbeat.
In the
1997 series of Heartbeat.
So it's quite a star in its own right.
Yeah.
Now it's a Morris LD...
LD5M.
And how did you come by it?
I went to an emergency service weekend in about 1995, I think it was, and it was just up for sale. It was not in this condition, it was quite rough. And a chap just turned up with it one day and said, you know, is there anybody interested in buying this? So I bought it off of him, because originally, when I joined the ambulance service in 1966, I took my driving test in one of these, not this particular one, but one of these, and I just fell in love with it.
So it's needed quite a lot of restoration then.
A lot of restoration, yeah.
What about some of the features of it, John? Perhaps you could point them out to us. Anything on the inside cabin there? Anything in particular?
Compared to modern day ones, they're quite basic, you know. There's not a lot in them. There's only the radio in the front. They're very basic compared to today.
Now this Morris has actually seen a lot of service in different parts of the country. At the moment it's got Leicester County Ambulance Service on it, but that's not the whole story, is it?
No, well, originally it was in service with Huntingdon and Peterborough Ambulance Service, and from there it went to Spalding St John's, who had it for quite a few years, and then it went, a doctor had it for about 5 or 6 years. I don't know quite what he had it for, but he had it, and then it came up for sale and I bought it. The wife wasn't too pleased when I turned up at home with it, you know, because she thought my ambulance days were over,
Right.
you know. But I've had tremendous pleasure out of it, rebuilding it, you know. It keeps me away from the pub in the evenings, rebuilding it. She won't go in it. She won't stop at a show over the weekend because there's too many people died in it, you know. But it gets me out at the weekend, seeing different parts of the country, you know, and it's a good hobby, you know. And being as in the service for 22 years, it's something I know a bit about, you know, and I meet a lot of old friends, and we have some good weekends.
Patrick Honey joins me now. Patrick is from Slough in Berkshire. Patrick, this is the only Morris LD1 on the road, but what's the rest of the history behind it?
Well, they were turned out as just chassis and cabs in 1954, and it's a true Morris vehicle, not a Morris commercial. And the front is an extension of the old J-type van, and Morris on the draft board made it into an LD1. They only did 2,500 with this front, and then they had to get a diesel into the range, and they couldn't fit it in, and they modified the front, and from then on all LDs had the extended and 3-bar front. So as far as we know, this is the only one with this XJ type front which is on the road today, a true LD1, and 8 chassis were sent to Appleyards of Leeds to be made into ambulances for the city of Bristol to their specification. The whole vehicle is coach built, ash framed, and inside it's all beautiful red leather and woodwork, no formica or plastic at all in the vehicle, which is unusual for an ambulance.
Now it also has a film history as well, hasn't it?
Yes, when it was sold off in 1972 it was acquired by a company, and one of the major films it was used in was Danny the Champion, children's film about a young boy in the Cotswolds. And I think it can be seen in many others. I always watch the old films to see if I can spot it.
Now you've got some photographs on display here for the many visitors to today's show. It actually shows, the photographs shows the immense amount of work that went into restoring it. Where did you actually find it originally?
I found it at High Wycombe in a scrapyard, and it really couldn't be driven away. It was in such a deteriorated condition. The body was just hanging off the chassis. So we took the body right off the vehicle and rebuilt the ash frame, and then put all the outer and inner cladding back onto a new ash frame. 80% of the ash frame is renewed. Some of it's 3 to 4 inches thick.
And was there a lot of money involved in the restoration work?
Well, apart from buying the timber and maybe some new aluminium sheets, but apart from that, everything is put back as the original. It's all original inside, all the lining and everything else. Everything is original, seats the lot.
Okay, Patrick, thanks for talking to us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, if you were ever involved in an accident in 1965, this Bedford here behind us is probably one of the models that would have come and collected you. Bill, tell us all about it.
Well, it's a 1965 J1 Bedford, and as you can see it was in service with the Birmingham Fire and Ambulance Service, because fire service and ambulance service were combined in those days. So
on the side as well, there's a set of numbers, 205. Tell us about them.
yeah, well, those are the fleet numbers of the vehicles, and our preservation group is named after this particular vehicle. We call ourselves the 205 group because this vehicle was renovated and put back to its original livery from its health authority Metropolitan Service livery, where it did end its days as a riot vehicle, actually.
Yeah.
So.
Now, in the mid-70s, I think I'm right in saying that this model was actually involved in a fairly traumatic call-out, wasn't it?
Yes, he was fourth in attendance at the Birmingham pub bombings in 1973, operating from Bristol Road Station.
If we take a look at the rear of the model, Bill, there's the whole stack of equipment here.
Yeah.
Tell us what's on board.
Well, it was very basic in those days. We had resuscitation equipment, as you see at the back there. On the right-hand side, the big box is the Novox oxygen therapy unit, and really, I mean, all it consisted of was an oxygen cylinder, tubing, and a mask. And basically, you strap the mask for resuscitation purposes on the patient's face, and did the old-fashioned Holger Nelson method to to resuscitate them. As we moved later on in years, we went on to the Automan resuscitator, which is the white unit with the red cross on the side. That automatically delivered oxygen on a positive pressure basis. So it was a bit of a step up from the Novox set.
I can see a flask there as well. Is that a flask on
Oh
the,
yes, yes,
top left?
Yes, there was a water carrier for patients that needed it. In the winter we used to carry hot water bottles, and they used to be kept in the stretcher blankets, keep the stretchers nice and warm.
And we've also got a jacket there as well, I see.
Yeah, this is the standard uniform of the Birmingham Fire and Ambulance Service at that time. You have to bear in mind that you didn't, incredibly, have to necessarily have a first aid certificate or qualification to be in the ambulance service. If you did, you usually got it from the St John's the Red Cross, as you can see there, and you got an extra 12 and sixpence.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I often wonder what happened to my 12 and sixpence. I think it got lost in differentials.
Yes.
Yeah. As you see, in those days as well, you had drivers and attendants. So attendants didn't drive. It's the drivers that got the extra pay, and they sported a wheel on the uniform there. Accidents and emergency drivers used to have a red backing in there to differentiate between removal motors and emergency motors, because essentially the service was in two halves. There was the 999 ambulances, and then there were the removal ambulances that did the day-to-day hospital transfers and doctors' requests into hospital.
This piece of apparatus here on the right, Bill, is this a stretcher?
Yes, it is. It's a Neil Robertson stretcher. They were used in rescue situations where we've got patients down great depths and from great heights. Very cumbersome and very difficult and time-consuming to strap patients in, but very safe.
Yeah.
So we're in, very safe.
The equipment that we see on board here, is it the original equipment that would have been in operation back in, the mid-60s?
Yes, in the mid-60s, you would have found the Ottoman on the vehicle. You would have found that Air Vivo, which basically is a rubber bag and a mask.
Yeah.
Yeah, for manual resuscitation. You'd found the two basic first aid bags. The little unit with the bottle and the sort of bellows in there, that's in the middle of those two boxes, that's an aspirator, and what you did basically was put the tube in the patient's mouth when you've got sort of excessive fluids you had to clear. And presuming you were kneeling down in the ambulance, your knee would go down there and you'd pump the bellows and suck fluid out from the patient's airways that way. They could actually fill a pint glass with fluid from just one depression of that. So
yeah,
they were simple.
I see as well, just on the inside of the compartment there, there's is that a spotlight I see?
Yes, yeah, there's a spotlight just for, if you're backing up to an incident, that you could turn it and just direct the spot onto behind. Getting a bit stiff with age, I'm afraid now.
A little bit like us all.
Yeah.
One last thing, Bill.
Yes.
There's a fascinating piece of history here in this binder. I noticed that there are things such as call-outs and things going back to 1948 right the way through to 52.
That's the history of the ambulance service in Birmingham in that little folder. So, before the Second World War, it was the ambulance service was run by a mixture of hospitals and what we call the Birmingham Hospital Contributory Fund, which is now, I think now, its descendant is the Birmingham Hospital Saturday Fund.
I see.
But the service was run by, as I said, a mixture of that, and the accident part of it was run by the police. So
Yeah, probably the most fascinating piece of information in there that I spotted was that I think the first fire that was ever recorded in Birmingham went back to 1612?
That's right. Yeah, we apparently we were for Cromwell, and the royalists come and had a go at us, and several incendiary fires were set around Birmingham, and they had to establish a watch to go around and check that we didn't all go up in flames, or our ancestors didn't anyway.
So really quite a remarkable history then.
Oh yeah. It's quite fascinating.
Joining me now is Steve Parry. Steve, what can you tell us about this state-of-the-art vehicle?
Well, this is new to Shropshire Ambulance Service. We have 6 of these Volvo fast response ambulances. A slight departure from our normal vehicles, the conventional ambulance, which is rather big, tall, and seen on the streets for many years. This is a radical departure, and we're happy to have acquired 6 of these vehicles in the last 2 months.
The cost of 6 vehicles must be quite astronomical, I would think.
Well, yes. Well, they work out at just over fully kitted. You're looking at £50,000 for a vehicle. So with 6 of them, yes, they're on the streets now around the Shropshire area on accident emergency duties. Part of our fleet of almost 40 vehicles.
Now, I mentioned earlier that the word state-of-the-art, it tends to be used quite a lot these days, but I think that's true, isn't it, of the inside compartment here. Tell us more about the inside.
Well, we obviously, for those who have a Volvo, will recognise the inside of a Volvo here, this ambulance, but also we have additions. We have a navigation system, satellite navigation, which pinpoints our destination, where we are at present, plots a course for our crews, very useful in emergency situations. We've also got a text messaging system on board. We now text our emergency crews by mobile phone from our control room. Other additions, we have numerous, as you see from the outside, numerous blue lights and audible warning systems on board. Of course, this vehicle is an automatic vehicle, so the speed range is acceleration range is much greater. We have winter speed and economy settings, as you see on the dashboard here. And so in this particular vehicle, those additions are very welcome to us.
And it's got the Motorola radio as well, I see.
That's right. Yes, that's connected to our headquarters in nearby Shrewsbury. Our control room there as part of our communication system, and so that really rounds off our communications from the vehicle to our main operating headquarters in Shrewsbury.
One thing that's caught my eye, Steve, this is quite interesting. I notice on the front here it's got whale, yelp and siren too. Does that mean there are 2 types?
That's right. There's a number of variations to the audible system, and also the lighting system as well. We've got lights to both sides of the vehicle, right and left light systems to alert vehicles if we have to pull across the road. We've also got front and back, and also, as you say, a variance on audible whale and yelp.
So each one has got a story.
Absolutely right, yes. Indeed.
Now, what can you tell us about the medical facilities on board? This is quite well kitted out, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it carries all the equipment we require, as any other emergency vehicle does in our fleet. The thing about this vehicle, the Volvo vehicle, as you've probably noticed, the room inside is very compact. Enough room for a paramedic, a patient, and on occasions someone who may travel with a patient, but that's about it. The conventional ambulances can take a number of people. This is very limiting. However, the equipment on board is well stored, and we carry oxygen, and we carry our defibrillators and all our medical additions in cupboards all around the vehicle in the back, as you see.
Yeah. There's something quite interesting as well about the stretcher system on board, isn't there?
Stretcher system's interesting. It's an easy load stretcher system, so technically, we still have 2 people manning this vehicle, but it's an easier system to operate than previous. The vehicle lowers, the stretcher comes out, the legs drop down, and the stretcher also can be configured so you can roll it along the floor to the wards or whatever, much easier. It's also got a counter on board each stretcher to tell you how many times the stretcher's been in use. That's a health and safety measure.
Really. One final thing, Steve. To become a paramedic these days, what sort of training's involved?
Well, before you're a paramedic, you have to have been taken on to the ambulance service in a technician role. That's the first stage of becoming a paramedic. Following that, paramedics undergo up to 3 months training in hospital-based and in classroom-based, and then a further 12 months before they can actually be certified paramedic and be based on our rotas on the emergency side.
So it really is quite involved then?
It is very involved these days, yes. To get into the ambulance service is quite a difficult thing these days. A lot of people want to do that because of the press and the TV coverage, obviously. But we have a technician level, we have a paramedic level, but also it shouldn't be forgotten we do non-emergency patients, we do outpatients, and we have levels and groups of staff undertaking that role.
Well, from Whitchurch in the north to Craven Arms in the south, this is really quite a community vehicle. Cliff, what's the story behind it?
Well, the idea, this is a community responder vehicle, which is what I do in my particular job. I'm an emergency medical responder. And what we do is we've looked at areas which give us a challenge to get a response to there within 8 minutes. And myself and 5 other colleagues have been placed throughout the county into those communities that present us a particular challenge. So the idea is it is initially a fast response vehicle. In my case, I'm a trained paramedic. It's got all the necessary equipment on board, so you can not only get there within 8 minutes, you can initiate any treatment that the patient needs for critical interventions can be done within the first few minutes before the crew turn up. The second benefit of that is it cuts down the crew on scene time. If the patient is prepared and ready to go at hospital, the on-scene time can be vastly reduced, thus getting the patient to where they need to be, definitive care, as quickly as possible.
You mentioned earlier there that you aim to get to incidents within 8 minutes. Do you have to work to targets at all for that?
Not specifically. Obviously, nationally, the ambulance service has to meet 75% of all life-threatening emergencies within 8 minutes. This scheme is there with that in mind, but it also gives the communities the reassurance that there is somebody there within the 8-minute barrier to initiate and start the treatment that is needed.
There's a helmet on the dashboard there with a torch. I presume that would be for nighttime work or such like?
Yes, nighttime work, road traffic accidents, anywhere. It's personal protective equipment, anywhere where you would think that your protection would be at risk. Building sites, road traffic accidents, farming accidents, anything like that, you wear that particular helmet.
It's a well-kitted out car, Cliff, isn't it? If we take a look at the back here, perhaps you could tell us, let's take a little wander around to the back of the car. Perhaps you could tell us exactly what's on board as part of the Shropshire Ambulance Service.
In the back of the actual vehicle we have basically all the critical intervention equipment that you're ever going to need. The bag here consists of all types of oxygen therapy, all types of airway management systems and intravenous systems.
Can we take a look inside?
Yes, of course you can.
Yeah, let's see some of the facilities of that particular bag. Obviously, if anyone needed it in an emergency, it would be good to know that it's on hand.
First piece of equipment that we come to, which is very regularly used, is the bag and mask. Place that on the patient's face, breathe away from them. Right. Easy and quick to get hold of.
Okay.
Next thing, we have a pulse oximeter, which basically tells you how well saturated your blood is with oxygen. It will also give you the patient's pulse rate.
Right, okay.
Okay. So, especially in certain cases, for instance, acute breathing difficulty, you need to know the patient's oxygen saturation before you start giving oxygen and the benefit of that in the meantime.
There's some more apparatus here as well, I notice.
This particular apparatus is basically to do with suction. Some of the packages you see are just duplicates of various pieces of equipment. But this basically is a suction unit. If we haven't got an airway, we can't breathe. If we can't breathe, we die very quickly. Clearing the airway of blood, vomit, sometimes facial tissue if it's a very serious injury. An excellent piece of kit. Saving a patient's life can be as simple as clearing their airway. Just that, for that particular job.
Okay. Now also, there's, in that red bag, just behind this blue one here, we've got is it a defibrillator?
Yeah, what we've got here is an automatic external defibrillator. Nice, very light, very portable. The facilities on this particular defibrillator,
So we can turn it around to the camera there. There we go.
you can leave it on automatic all the time, which means it will advise you if the patient requires a shock. It has a manual override section, so you can manually override it, so you can decide whether the patient needs shocking, the patient's heart needs shocking, and indeed it will monitor the patient's heart through what they call lead 2, which is just one view of the heart. So, and it will also talk to you all the time. Would you like to hear it?
Yes, why not? Why not?
This is what you get when you switch it on. It's not supposed to do that.
Let's try again.
Apply pads to patient's bare chest. Connect defib pads to cable.
So basically that's advising you exactly what to do for the patient. Once,
So it's really quite high tech then.
very much indeed.
Yeah.
But very easy to use, very light, portable. And we've actually got these in our community schemes where we train volunteers as members of the public, being used in the totally automatic version for the simple reason they tell you what you need to do for the patient every minute.
Right.
If it is shock the patient, then that advises that. If there's no shock advised, unlike some of these units, it will tell you what to do. So if there's no shock, there's no pulse, and there's no respirations, commence CPR.
Well, as far as 999 rescue vehicles are concerned, this has to be the ultimate. Tracy Morell from the County Air Ambulance is with me. Tracy, I bet this has got some stories to tell, hasn't it?
It probably has now. This has been in service for 10 years here at Cosford. It's 20 years old, the Bolco. So yes, we've moved all types of patients and all types of case in this machine.
Over the years, I mean, what sort of work would it have done, would you think, in the area?
In types of calls, we deal with all types of calls, from road traffic accidents to access problems where land vehicles can't get to the patients. So we really deal with a variety of incident really on this.
Now, you're one of the paramedics for the County Air Ambulance. How long is the training involved in that?
It's quite lengthy really, because you have to be a paramedic even to be able to come and work on this vehicle. Then you have to go through the Civil Aviation Aircrew course. You have to be very, very high up on your skills. So we do additional courses as well. So all in all, you're probably looking at 6-7 years training.
As much as that? That's quite intense then, really.
It is. It's a very hard day's work here really, because we can go to trauma case after trauma case on this machine. Sometimes the day's very long where you're doing cases all day, and sometimes they're very quiet days where you have to be ready at a moment's notice, so it can be hard work.
Okay. Let's move to some of the equipment on board. Tell us about the facilities here.
Okay, we've got all medical equipment here that a land vehicle carries. We carry a defibrillator, we carry suction units up on the left hand side. We've got the same amount of oxygen facility, we've got portable ventilators, we carry all the same amount of drugs that land ambulances carry, and have got the capability, as you can see, to carry 2 patients on this aircraft.
Let's take a little look around the rear there as to where they'd, perhaps if we can just take a little move around.
Okay.
This is where they'd actually be loaded in, presumably.
Yeah, in this particular aircraft, what we do is once our patient's ready for loading, as you can see, generally most of our patients, because of their illness or ailments, are put onto a spinal board, so that's taken out, and the bed is actually loaded through the rear with the patient on it, well covered, well strapped. Looks a little bit daunting because we're a bit low in the back here, so we have a precursor to loading our patients just for a short while to ask them to shut their eyes while they go through this tunnel. Ultimately they come out the other end and we've got access to head and chest then, so that we can deal with the patient.
Right.
Now, the running costs of one of these Bolco machines can't be cheap, can it?
No, this particular aircraft runs at about £800,000 a year, so the fundraising side of it's daunting for our fundraising people, but that's what keeps us flying. So.
Yeah. And who actually organises the fundraising for this machine?
Yeah, we've got a whole team of fundraisers throughout the counties that we serve, and it's individuals really basis. We work on deeds of covenant, flowers from funerals, plus people that do many fundraising events throughout the year. So it's all coordinated by fundraisers, but individuals just donate via the appeals office in Dudley. So.
Now, today is actually a very special day for this machine, isn't it?
It is, very sadly. This is the last day for the Bolco 105. It's going to be its last day of service before we bring online the new machine tomorrow.
Yeah. And can we take a look at the... is it possible to take a look at the new machine? It's just over in the hangar behind us, I think, isn't it?
Hidden away in the hangar just at the moment. It's just being kitted up, ready for its first flight tomorrow. So
quite an exciting day for it, then.
It is, yes, it is.
And what would be the cost? I mean, this is a brand new machine. I mean, what does this actually cost now?
Yeah, I think in running terms it's a little bit more costly than the Bolco, but by legislation we've actually had to move on into the realms of a new aircraft. Those Bolcos are being phased out within the next 5 years, and we're looking more towards virtually £1 million a year to run this machine.
Really?
Yes, yeah.
So a lot more money again then?
A little bit more money, yes, on top of things, but the capabilities of it are a little bit better. There's certainly a little bit medical equipment is stored much nicer for the paramedics to work, and there's a little bit more room for us. So we have definitely come up in the world as far as air ambulance goes.
Is it possible to just take a look on the inside for some of the facilities on board? I mean, it seems at first glance on the inside to be a lot larger, am I?
It is.
Yeah?
That's one of the beauties for us, is that in fact in the back of this one there are 2 seats, so we can have either both paramedics in the back, or there is facility now for us to take a doctor on board, as well as the front facing seat, because part of the paramedic's role is not only sort of aeromedicine but also map reading. We have to be able to navigate, so we are the pilot's assistant as well en route to cases. So yeah, we've got a lot more room to move in, and that is absolutely excellent for us. All our equipment is much nicely stowed up there on the bulkhead. There's purpose designed, so that we've got equipment where we need it and to hand. So yeah, we've done well medically wise in the back. All the controls in the rear of this we can actually control for ourselves, whereas in the Bolco the pilot actually controlled that. Yeah, I mean, I can notice that it's a lot more modern in design, isn't it? It is, yes, yeah. And I noticed in the front compartment there quite a few computer screens, which obviously it didn't have in the older model. This obviously indicates the advancement in civil aviation, I suppose. That's right, yes. Everything that the pilot sees, the paramedic can also see on the left-hand side. This model is also going to be fitted with a moving map system, which it hasn't got on it at the moment, so that makes navigation far easier. It's got all the new GPS system, all the new radio system, and it is far easier from a paramedic's point of view to be able to read the screens. Not that that's vitally important for us, but as we do navigate with the assistance of the pilot, it is helpful to know what's going on. Well, Tracy Morell, thanks for talking to us. Thank you.